Hi, my name is Stephen Nolan, and I'm the Managing Director of the UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability. And I'm delighted that you're able to join us today for this virtual session. On the 4th of November, we are looking back at yesterday's COP26 Finance Day and unpacking what all the different announcements and commitments across policymakers, regulators, and market actors mean for the sustainable finance agenda in the coming months and years. I'm delighted to be focused today on this session in light of COP26 finance objectives. What next for European sustainable finance leadership? And earlier on today, we had Commissioner Mairead McGuinness, the European Union's Commissioner for Financial Services and Financial Stability and the Capital Markets Union, join us and speak to her thoughts about what COP26 and the Finance Day mean yesterday and means for this agenda going forward. We've got a super panel. We've got Carsten Loeffner, who is the Managing Director, the Green and Sustainable Finance Cluster Germany. We've got Pauline Beckwith, who's the Executive Director of Paris's Finance for Tomorrow. We've got Sarah Lovasovo, Head of Group ESG Euronext Group. And Sarah, I think I made a mangle of your second name. Please forgive me. And then we also have Colette Coogan, who's the Director with Sustainable Finance Ireland. And thrilled to have you all here with us today. We're live from a studio out of Dublin, and I want to thank AIB for supporting today's event. And today's event is a COP26 event, and as I said, we're really looking forward to it. If I may, Carsten, and just turn to you first, in Germany, and delighted that you're with us here today, Carsten. You know, you were chairing the German Federal Sustainable Finance Committee, and a document was produced by that group. It was a fantastic document earlier on this year. So in terms of COP26 yesterday, one of the key things in the finance side was the mobilization of capital. And, you know, as a very proud European and looking into the centre of Europe, the heart of Europe there is Germany and France. And when I looked at Germany as well, in terms of the capital markets, the banking sector, the type of capital that you deploy, not just at a local level or national level in Germany, regionally across Europe, but also globally. So German capital is all over the world, and it is now looking to do more and more in the sustainable finance agenda. So in terms of what we witnessed yesterday and what we're seeing within the European Union, what is Germany doing to mobilize public and private finance in this space, please, Carsten? And how important was the development of the document and the committee that you oversaw in trying to achieve that, please?
Yeah, many thanks, Stephen. Good afternoon to the audience. Very happy to be with you. The landscape is changing. That is, I think, the most important message that also came from yesterday's Finance Day at COP26. Certainly, when it comes to the large amounts of capital required for the transformation to finance sustainable infrastructure, public pockets will not be enough. So consequently, private financial investments have to be mobilized. And for doing that, Germany, with its sustainable finance strategy dating back to May this year, that built, you're right on that, absolutely, Stephen, on the recommendations by the Sustainable Finance Committee that I used to chair. So it's a major step forward. The train has left the station, and there's a big understanding, and it's a very exciting phase, by the way, with the coalition negotiations just underway, where one of the biggest issues is how to finance the transition in Germany. And it's, to me at least, it's very clear that it won't happen without mobilizing the private financial sector. And in that respect, what I take from the German government's sustainable finance strategy is certainly an understanding of that very fact. There's a few topics in there that actually talk to strengthening capital markets in order to be able to live up to that challenge. It starts, of course, with the public sector itself, i.e. KfW, will become a transformational bank that will be centerpiece to government actions to that extent. But certainly there's much understanding that by enhancing transparency and the risk management capabilities within private financial institutions, there's much to achieve, and that is clearly speaking from Germany's sustainable finance strategy. So that's as a brief introduction, Stephen.
And Carsten, if I may just stay with you for a moment, because across the course of today, a lot of what we heard about the role of the financial services ecosystem to finance the activities of the real economy. And obviously, you know, COP26 is not just about finance. You know, today is Energy Day and so on and so forth. So just again, within Germany, and you know, we hear so much about the German economy consists to a large degree of the SME sector. So again, how important is that, or where are you in terms of Germany, in terms of financing that sector, or is that sector more so the firms on the smaller side? Are they still trying to get their heads around the whole climate action agenda, Carsten?
Actually, yes, very much so. Now, so I have to admit, it's a process that is just about to get more traction. You need to know about the German financial sector that roughly 80% is bank financed. That's maybe slightly different to some other, in particular, Anglo-Saxon countries. So, but the banking sector as such plays a very important role to get the financing going. And there's a second fact that is very important to understand, that roughly 50% of the banking market share is with the savings and cooperative banks. And they have pretty large networks throughout the country, very regionalized local ties to smaller scale and medium scale businesses. And then they will play, next to the large commercial banks, a crucial role in order to get the finance going, and actually in supporting small and medium-sized enterprises throughout the transition. Just simply by asking pertinent questions. Okay, what is your business model? Is it fit for future? Say, are you doing the right things? And then it's about understanding that it's a big business opportunity for the banking sector as well, as to one, differentiate itself toward maybe its peers, but as well as to play a crucial role in particular in financing those infrastructure investments that will need to be put in place. And infrastructure is of the essence when we talk about a sustainable future. So you can see just by that the level that is going beyond the federal level, so I mean the state, the lender level, and the municipal level are crucial in order to address this.
So and it's complicated, right? So it's how do you build capacity, not just in financial institutions, but within those SME firms as well. And again, one of the big topics you saw yesterday is around climate disclosure, climate reporting, and the role of TCFD within that. And again, that's a framework that people are beginning to use. But I'm going to now pivot, if I may, to Sarah. Sarah's joined us, I think, from Milan. So Sarah, as always, great to see you. And thank you for participating in today. There's some great news. You know, I was delighted to participate recently in the launch of ESG Generation in terms of Italy's new sustainable finance platform. And again, your leadership was to the fore of that. And I'll come to you in a moment about the G20 and on the Italian presidency and so on and what they've done this year. But if I look at your role within Euronext as the head of Group ESG, and during Climate Finance Week, we had Stefan, the chief executive, participate in an event with us in Bloomberg. And it was just incredible to see the growth of the ESG segment. But, you know, flipping from Carsten talking about maybe the SMEs to the larger corporates that you as the group support, what are you seeing in terms of the ESG agenda, in terms of the demands coming from clients? If you don't mind, if I can unpack that a little bit, please, Sarah.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to be here to represent both Yes Generation Italy, the Italian Financial Center for Sustainability, and Euronext, which is a federation of exchanges with a strong European footprint. What we hear from issuers and what is, I think, their main concern when it comes to the sustainable finance agenda in the Paris Agreement is that they are worried about their credibility. So credibility is the key issue. They have to withstand the blah blah challenge, to quote Greta, whom we had the opportunity to hear, firsthand in Milan for the youth COP. It's imperative that issuers can rely on standards against which their net zero commitments, their transition pathways can be assessed and validated. Issuers are no climate scientists, so you cannot assume that companies produce their own science about climate change. So it's very important that we come to a sort of agreement in the financial ecosystem, but it's an agreement that should also involve civil society, NGOs, as to what is a credible transition strategy and a credible climate target. And once we have that, and once companies do their homework and commit to implementing science and recognize standards, companies should be allowed to focus on the delivery. They should be allowed to focus on restructuring their business model, restructuring their operations in order to follow through on their commitment. But we don't have that, and I think this really is a barrier to a greater ambition from companies, because the danger that all these is just considered as empty commitments is it's around the corner. And so we hope that the renewed sustainable finance strategy in the EU will help address these issues, to make sure we can really have a integrity in the financial markets, also around these long-term commitments and transition strategies.
And thanks for that, Sarah, because I'm also aware both yourself and Carsten were involved in the initial EU technical expert group on sustainable finance, and it was a real thrill to have Commissioner Mairead McGuinness join us this morning and speak to what that initial work has actually led to. And it is a leadership position for Europe, and she was making that point, but Europe can't do it on its own. We need all jurisdictions. But I suppose looking back to that renewed sustainable finance strategy and where we are now, does it sometimes strike you, and I can remember I first met you a few years ago, does it sometimes strike you from, do you think we're going too slowly, or are we actually, is this moving at light speed in terms of the agenda? Because you were there among that initial batch in developing that framework, or at least supporting the policymakers with your expertise to develop that framework. Do you think, in light of COP, that we've actually really moved things on dramatically, or is there still, more to do at the policy level within Europe, please, Sarah?
So clearly, we had a roadmap, and there's been a delay. There's been a delay in the delivery of that of the roadmap. By now, the EU taxonomy should have been up and running. So there's no denying that there's been a delay, even though the plan was ambitious. So I think from a global perspective, Europe is for sure the leading jurisdiction in the development of these robust set of standards that should help make sense of impact, make sense of risks associated with all the ESG issues. Clearly, politics gets in the way, but I don't think we should leave these topics to technical experts alone. So I think it is a very good thing that sustainable finance frameworks are the result of conversations among policymakers and Parliament and member states, so that their final results will be representing the consensus, and it's going to be something everybody is going to stand behind.
Great, and thank you for that, Sarah. And if I may now just spring from Milan into Paris. Actually, no, Pauline, you're in Glasgow. I think you're still in Glasgow. I met you there the other day. So, and it was great to see the French pavilion yesterday, really alight. One of your Finance for Tomorrow events. So congratulations on that. And if I may, and I know some questions I'm going to ask you, but partly what we're seeing here as well, from just listening to the guys, is a data issue as well. And firms being able to say, this is what we're doing, and a third party is able to validate that. In Paris, you guys have put a really big focus on data collection beyond just a simple survey. And the Paris-based observatory is actually becoming this world-class tool. And I know we'll get to Colette in a moment. Ireland is looking to use it. And you announced with the One Planet during COP that you're doing something there around that. So where are you on that initiative, please, Pauline? And how do you think it links back to what Carson in Frankfurt and Sarah in Milan were talking about there just a moment ago?
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. And I'm very glad to be here. So you are living live from Glasgow. I'm sorry if that's not quiet enough. That's a quiet place I found. So regarding the Sustainable Finance Observatory, indeed, Sarah talked about credibility, and we are convinced that we need to track the commitments made by financial actors to ensure that collectively there is a change in the finance practices, but also in the financial flows. So that's why we launched last year the Sustainable Finance Observatory. And so we collect first the commitments, the announcements made by financial actors, and we included this year a monitoring of this commitment. So when the financial actor published a report explaining where is it towards its commitment, you can find this on the website. And we also have aggregated data per financial sector for asset managers, for banks, for insurers, for private equity. You can find aggregated data regarding the green investment, the coal exposure, and we are planning to improve in the coming years to add alignment indicators and also to add fossil fuel exposure to track if there is indeed a decrease in the fossil fuel exposure. And so we are really convinced that it's key to follow these commitments and to follow, to track the financial flows. And that's why we are very happy that the One Planet Summit initiative announced a One Planet Data Hub that will be a platform that will gather all the initiatives that would like to track these commitments.
And Pauline, it was great to see in your press release during the week on the One Planet Data Hub, FC4S noted as a supporter of that, and we're thrilled to support it. Pauline, who is using the platform?
To date, first, the financial actors, because they report their commitments. And then we also have the public authorities that check the data published in the platform. We also have NGOs that check the data and civil society. The idea is really to make this data accessible to the public, to the citizens, so they can follow up and understand in a simple way how the financial flows are transforming and the accountability of financial actors. So this year we also included lots of data to put in perspective what we are reporting and lots of explanation about the indicators we report.
Great, thank you for that, Pauline. And it's always great. You're at a UN event when you see a UN security guard walk past you in the background there a moment ago.
Sorry.
No, I'm thrilled. I just wish I was there, right? I think we're all feeling that right now. Colette, you're here in Dublin with me, so thank you for joining me in the studio at the home of Sustainable Finance Ireland in terms of Dublin. And, we've heard there about, SMEs financing, the data part, the credibility part. So during Climate Finance Week last year, you had the Irish Minister of Finance, Pascal Donoghue, who's also the president of the Eurogroup, and Mark Carney launched the Irish TCFD campaign. And again, linking it back to COP and yesterday's Finance Day, climate disclosure and reporting was a big topic. And we had Frank Eldison on from the NGFS earlier on, and he was talking about the tracking and the monitoring. And now we're seeing the TCFD being baked into the European Commission, it's been baked into the SEC, and a lot of mandatory stuff happening. How, in terms of where have you got with the Irish TCFD campaign now? And is it a model people are looking at internationally to try and replicate, please?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me, Stephen, and hello to everyone watching. So as you mentioned, so the campaign was launched during Climate Finance Week 2020 with Minister Donoghue alongside Mark Carney really advocating Irish support of the recommendations and encouraging uptake. So from that, I suppose the campaign was an action in the Ireland for Finance action plan to increase Irish support. So I guess how we approached it, we kind of looked at different angles as to how we could, I guess, increase awareness and actually encourage Irish organisations to actually implement the recommendations. So we were the first region to implement an Irish collective after Japan, which was announced during Climate Finance Week this year. But really, I guess from the start, what we did was we engaged with sort of the major players. So we engaged with the semi-state organisations initially alongside the NTMA and the Department of Finance to really kind of look at them to provide, I guess, in some ways, some stewardship to say, listen, they have a very big impact across energy, forestry, transport, etc. So we had a lot of kind of one-to-one engagements to kind of go through the why of TCFD, to actually show the benefits as, in a lot of ways as well. We then approached large financial actors, which was very interesting kind of to meet with the different groups. And then we also engaged with large corporates. So we had a very kind of wide spectrum of engagements across, I guess, a 3 to 4 month period. And I guess to kind of follow on from that, and I think you had referenced it earlier, we held a webinar back in June. And that was really to kind of, I guess, provide different perspectives of the TCFD. So we had Curtis Ravenel, who's one of the founding members. We had Sarah actually contribute to that as well from a Euronext perspective. And then I think you had referenced the European Commission was also there. So a policy officer was able to kind of, I guess, allay those kind of concerns about, if it's not TCFD, is it something else? And he was very much TCFD is at a minimum, which we saw kind of echoed yesterday at Finance Day during COP. So that was kind of beneficial to new supporters to get those kind of insights. And then I guess another kind of, after the awareness and the engagement, another key phase of the programme, which again comes back to something that's been echoed over today and yesterday, was the capacity building piece. So we obviously wanted to equip the organisations who were supporting the TCFD to actually be able to adopt the recommendations and implement them to a really high standard. So we had approached the training kind of in 2 phases. We had engaged with the UNEPFI to develop a bespoke training programme, which was delivered across 2 half days. It was quite comprehensive, but it was a standalone piece. And that was really just to give people a sense of what they would need to do to actually, implement the practices and then report on it. And then separate to that, again, to support the companies who were becoming supporters of the TCFD, we found the most beneficial approach would be a capacity building piece where you'd actually meet as a collective, a community of practice every month and actually look at the recommendations in a lot of detail. So you'd have a deep dive session to kind of talk through examples or questions. So that actually kicked off during Climate Finance Week. So we had the first session during Climate Finance Week, which was October, and we'll have the second session in November, and they will actually run until May 2022 to help kind of support the implementation of the recommendations. And then, as you had referenced, during Climate Finance Week this year, we had our launch event on the Bloomberg platform with really nice endorsement from Mary Shapiro to kind of talk to the Irish Collective and how that, as you mentioned, that model could potentially be adapted in other jurisdictions to help bring on support of the recommendations.
So in essence, because this isn't an inexpensive exercise, this is a year that you've been running with this. There's resources, there's staff, there's training, UNPFI, but you've actually had to go back into almost like the nuts and bolts of it, because you just don't want Irish located firms who are global footprints in themselves just sign up to something for the sake of it. And I think, Sarah was going back there in terms of credibility. So you've actually put together a structure to enable them, almost like using TCFD as a Trojan horse, to build in-house capabilities around climate reporting and disclosures. What are you seeing in terms of, internationally, and what are we trying to do with FC-FRES, Japan and Mexico now, if you don't mind giving us an update on that?
Sure, of course, yes. So we have had some conversations, I think you had referenced them earlier, in relation to Mexico and the potential for a Mexican consortium similar to the Irish one. I think, I guess, lessons learned from our perspective was that, again, it's a long process. It takes a lot of engagement. There are definitely benefits in collaboration with other jurisdictions, even to share insights and best practices, so they can maybe take elements of the campaign and use it as a model, because I guess we have, it did take a full year. We've had terrific outcomes. We have a significant uptake of the recommendations. But a key point that you kind of spoke to there is the longer term piece will actually make sure it's not a tick box exercise, that there's actually quality in the level of climate related disclosures. and that will actually, improve the skill set. And the TCFD obviously overlaps to many other areas. So it's not that it's just for TCFD. It actually is increasing the awareness and the level of understanding of climate-related risks and opportunities across Irish firms.
And thanks for that, Colette. Carson, if I could come back to you there, because I've just seen a sneak preview of the FC4S's annual assessment results of 29 financial centres. And again, number one is talent capacity development. And no surprise to you in terms of your other hat that you wear in Frankfurt University. So just, and we've seen that again and again today. So we've had X amount of sessions where this is the second last one. We've had over 20 speakers, from a commissioner to the co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, member of the ECB board member, and a lot of FC4S members. We keep coming back to talent or lack of talent in terms of holding back the scaling up of the sustainable finance agenda. Within Frankfurt, Carsten, and within the work that you're doing, what are you trying to do as a financial centre to actually get on top of that agenda and upskill these people? Because, let's be very clear here, and Sarah made an interesting point about credibility and people being worried about it. Not everybody is trying to do a greenwashing exercise here. People are genuinely trying to do this. But if they haven't got somewhere to get the content, to hire the staff aren't available, it is challenging for them. And it's not just market actors, it's also policymakers and regulators. So what's your view on that, please, Carsten, as a kind of a topic, please?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. That is a very pertinent point. And if I may, the Sustainable Finance Committee that I chaired came up with that recommendation to the federal government as well to look into the qualification issues on all levels, right? From the very top in financial companies, enterprises, to the client-facing people, risk people, and then it goes to education, universities, schools. So what I see, as I can mention a few examples very easily. So what we currently work on collectively with a few financial institutions is to agree on a shared understanding about a low-hanging fruit, basically, and that is a curriculum on what financial institution employees need to know in terms of what sustainable finance is about, what the opportunities are, how to interact on this topic with clients, for instance. Same happens in the university space. So there's much development and much thinking right now how to integrate sustainable finance topics into the mainstream curricula. I think this is something that needs to happen because, as we all know, the demand for talent and for knowledge is very high, and we can see this just at a very interesting tiny example. So the Association of Public Banks actually managed to agree that sustainable finance becomes part of the curriculum for training for very young people in the banking sector. So it's absolutely obvious that this now tends to start at the very beginning when people begin their career in the financial sector. And that is what it needs to be. But next to that, let's not forget that the skill set in the broader public is an issue in itself as well. Because in the end, the financial sector sells financial products to the broader public. And the better the understanding is at that level, the broader public, the more demand we could expect in terms of sustainability-related preferences. So it requires a holistic perspective as to embrace the upskilling challenge. And that is not at an end right now. So we just have started, and I expect much more to come.
And thanks for that, Carsten. And Sarah, if I may just jump to you, because there aren't a lot of Carstens, Sarahs, Paulians, or Colettes floating around right now, and that's part of the challenge in terms of that capacity piece. But if I can may just move to Italy itself. So, Italy was one of those first countries to really take the green and sustainable finance agenda and run with it a few years ago. And FC itself came out of the Italian 2017 G7, the host of the Italian G7 presidency, where the Italian government tabled an initiative which then became FC. And now this year again, after 2 or 3 years of it not being established, the G20 under the Italian presidency re-established the Sustainable Finance Study Group and then promoted up to a Sustainable Finance Working Group, which, in essence allows that recommendations may become policy actions as well. So in terms of ES generation being established, in terms of the Italian Sustainable Finance Hub, and in terms of what the government is doing, would it be an obvious statement to say that sustainable finance is very much back front and centre within the Italian financial community, policymakers, regulators and market actors?
So I think that from our perspective, from the perspective of ES Generation Italy, seeing Italy using its presidency of the G20 to re-establish the Sustainable Finance Working Group was a clear signal that sustainable finance is back on the agenda of what our Prime Minister Mario Draghi called multilateralism. So we are using the power of conversations among policymakers to address sustainable finance. So it's we are paying a close attention to the output of that forum, and I would like to draw your attention to some of the outputs of the first meetings of this working group, of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, because the multi-year roadmap that was developed as part of the presidency has some very interesting elements. So I just would like to point your attention to 3 of these elements. For example, the recommendations from the group that all countries and forums should address material positive contribution to sustainability goals and should focus on outcomes when developing sustainable finance initiatives within their jurisdiction. So this is a shift to impact rather than materiality approaches. So it's a very interesting development. Also, having heard earlier from Meryl McGuinness about the importance of double materiality here in Europe. Second, the principle that all approaches to sustainable finance, regardless of the jurisdiction, should be science-based when it comes to environment and evidence-based when tackling other ESG topics. And this is another way to reiterate the importance of the impact principle. And finally, I think a very interesting outcome of this G20 on sustainable finance is stressing that jurisdictions should try to achieve interoperability among different sustainable finance approaches and systems. So these are all signs that sustainable finance has moved to the next level with a focus on outcomes, a focus on science, and the attempt to avoid market fragmentation, because this is one of the key perils of having different speeds in the different jurisdictions regarding sustainable finance. So very, very proud to that our country has contributed to these developments.
That's super, and as I said, not just this, but has been a real leader in sustainable and green finance over the years. Colette, just building on what Sarah was saying there, because the G20 developed their own roadmap, and the Indonesian presidency next year will hopefully run with that. And actually, Dr. Datma Jun, who's the co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, was saying to me this morning that the way that roadmap is structured is that no presidency can now actually turn around and say, we no longer want to do this. It's now part of the G20 work. Ireland, during Climate Finance Week, the Irish Minister for Finance and President of the Eurogroup launched Ireland's first National Sustainable Finance Roadmap, and FC4S partnered with Sustainable Finance Ireland in delivering that. How important, in your view, has that been? Because, in terms of the process and developing it, you wouldn't mind briefly just kind of give us an overview of that, and how important is it to underpin Irish ambitions in sustainable finance, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, it was developed by Sustainable Finance Ireland in conjunction with UN-convened FC4S Skill in Ireland. Yeah. It was a really collaborative, comprehensive process. So it saw 50 firms participate across 8 working groups. It took 6 months, so it was 6 months of engagement, looking at best practices with UN FC4S, involved in that, and also then looking at the recommendations, whittling them down to, a more manageable list. Again, it was a huge amount of meetings, back and forth, and really healthy kind of discussion amongst the working groups, which resulted then in 18 actions being delivered, as you said, was launched during Climate Finance Week. And those 18 actions are across kind of 5 groups, so I can't remember them all, so I'll have to look down briefly. So we have talent, which we talked to a lot, industry readiness, enabling environment, promotion, and digital. Okay. The last one. So we have 5 kind of key pillars for that. And basically, the number one action, sort of, overarching all of that, is the establishment of an international Irish Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence. So that's kind of considered the linchpin of that roadmap. And really, it's kind of considered that with this establishment of a centre of excellence, it will help bring all of those actions together. Yes. It will obviously deliver other pieces, but with the roadmap, it's a way of bringing together all of the collaborative partners and actually delivering on the goals. So there's kind of very kind of, I guess, some of them are quite specific kind of time-bound goals, which is great. It's very tangible. So there's 18 actions listed there with kind of lead stakeholders and owners, and to show kind of the level of input and collaboration in actually delivering the outputs of the roadmap. Okay,
and like back to Sarah's point, outcome-led, science-based, collaborative across public and private. So great to see, and FC4S is delighted to co-develop that. Pauline, if I can switch to you, because obviously one of the key things, and over dinner the other night we discussed the whole area of transition and supporting the transition. And again, this is something that Paris has been, Finance for Tomorrow in Paris has been very much focused on the last few years. Just, from your perspective of COP, and how important is that as an agenda item? And what, again, do you think, not just Paris, but also financial centres in Europe should be focusing on in terms of the transition agenda, please?
Yes, I think just transition is really important now, and is really important at this COP. Just transition is really the fact to take into account the social consequences of the ecological transition. And to date, we focus a lot on climate strategies, and we have to focus on climate strategies of the companies we invest in, but we should also take into account the social consequences of this climate strategy. And so that's why we are focusing in the Paris Financial Center, but I know in the UK it's the same, and in all over places this concept is rising, and it's even a political axis of the European Commission. So private investors should focus on just transition and include in their investment strategy not only climate focus but also social focus, to ensure that no one is left behind. And it's a matter for the states, of course, but it's also a matter for private investors. They should focus that the companies take into account that topic. And that's why we launched last June a coalition called Investor for a Just Transition. The objective is to dialogue with companies on that topic, and also to finance an academic partnership, and to release a data hub on just transition indicators. And yesterday we launched the international side of this coalition. So we appeal every non-French investor that would like to join this coalition to jump in this journey. We really believe just transition is a keystone.
Brilliant, and I think just transition, biodiversity, climate. Sarah, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like a bit of an amateur therapist. I'm getting phone calls from probably the same people you deal with going, I'm trying to get my head around climate. Now it's just transition and now it's biodiversity. But unfortunately for the market, these are the trends. This is where, as Carson said, the train has left the station. And, listening to Commissioner McGuinness this morning from a policy and a regulatory perspective, and then Frank Ellison from the NGFS and even the Bank of England today, they will begin to step in from a supervisory perspective. They do not think that firms are doing what they need to be doing in terms of these transition pathways forward. I'm just conscious of time, so if I may just be bold and just ask every panel member, just one last question is, it's been a very exciting time building towards COP. We can see the bit of buzz and the traffic behind you as well, Paulie, in COP, so we know it's busy. There were great announcements yesterday, GFAS, the Glasgow Financial Alliance, 130 trillion, 450 firms involved, IFRS's foundation around standards development, Africa, 8.5 billion fund to help South Africa transition its energy system, and so on and so forth. And there'll be more over the next number of weeks. But COP in itself, it's also a point in time. And as going back to that, the train has left the station. So we are very much advanced in this agenda. So Carsten, if I can just start with you, what do you hope to see happen over the next 12 months as a result of this energy and momentum behind COP, please? I think you're on mute, Carsten.
I'm sorry. There's 2 points. One is that it gets full acceptance that the private financial sector will play a very important role to finance the transition. And to get that in everyone's head and to accept that. And then maybe even in collaboration, public-private finance, say there's lots to do in terms of scaling up blended finance. That's certainly one. And secondly, what I currently see is that on the skill set agenda, there's so much happening, so much dynamics, that it's really very impressive. That's a prerequisite for the financial sector to actually being able to tackle that. And maybe one last point, what I really would like to see is that we stick to a scientific approach on the European level when it comes to qualify what is essentially a green economic activity. So we will have to keep the credibility of the system that is just currently being built. Thanks.
Thank you, Carsten. Sarah?
For me, the important thing is that we get down into the details. So I would like to see over the next 12 months details about how the pledges, how the announcements made by governments are going to be rolled out. So we heard, for example, a pledge to stop funding fossil fuel related projects abroad from a number of governments, Italy included. Would like to see how these will play out in practice. And also, I would like to see perhaps a bit more focus on commodities. The fact, one of the initiatives that was launched yesterday is a very important one around agriculture commodities, but we all know fossil fuels are the bigger commodity here, and I think it's very important that we start to address that commodity as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Colette here in studio in Dublin.
Yes, so sorry, a little bit repetitive, sorry, Sarah, but again, I think it's down to the substance. So again, with these kind of pledges that have been made, it's really to see kind of the credibility. So we've talked a lot about transparency, but really it would be great to see the detail of it, like how is it going to be tracked, how is it going to be measured, what are the specific time considerations, because I think that might be something that has been lacking up to that point. So I think if we can get to a point where, like with GFANs, with the announcement yesterday of the 130 trillion, saying that will be underpinned by kind of scientific based approaches, more of that kind of action I think would be great to see, just to ensure that we are actually making progress and it's more action and less kind of very
blah blah. Exactly. As Sarah said earlier on, in terms of, she was quoting obviously Brett as well. Okay, so again, you're that credibility. You're the science, like Carsten said, science based.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Pauline, I'm going to finish with you because you're actually in Glasgow. I've said it a few times, but you are. So we should be getting some gold from you now, because this is you've really soaked up what's happening at COP. So if you don't mind finishing off, what are your hopes, please?
Actually, I will join my colleagues because I have 3 points. The first one is transparency. We need to see how the commitments are declined in details with a technical approach and scientific-based approach. we need to develop impact finance and not stick to ESG. And ESG must be the basis for all sustainable, for all finance actually. But we need to go a step further with impact finance. And my third point is, as I said before, just transition. We also need to include the social dimension of the ecological transition.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Pauline. And again, FC4S, we've just got our data from our own assessment process today, and we're seeing the different trends within our members. So I know I'll be reaching out to you all within Europe and further afield from FC4S members to help us develop a refresh strategy for 2022 and beyond. And we hope to launch that with you in person, subject to COVID restrictions, in Abu Dhabi on the 20th of January next year, where FC4S meets, and the members meets after a two-year gap of not meeting in person. So I want to thank everybody today. Again, you've all got very busy schedules. Colette, thank you for coming into the studio. Carsten in Frankfurt, Sarah in Milan, and Pauline in Glasgow, but representing Paris. I really found that exciting, and it really resonated with what Commissioner McGuinness was saying today as well, around the activities. And as you said, Sarah, or somebody said, outcomes, science-based, transparency, but as she said, accountable. You know, it isn't about greenwash, it's about accountable, and that's what the EU is putting in place. And obviously, as she was saying today, the EU can't do it on its own, and recognising that other regions are at different stages. And this is why the International Platform for Sustainable Finance is so important. She used that word share, to share with other jurisdictions, because this is in all, while it may be competitive, but it's still in all our interests to get this right. So I want to just thank, as I said, Carsten, Sarah, Colette, and Pauline, and wish you all a good day. Goodbye.